Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Miller. This is for class Criminal Justice 304. Today, I'm going to be talking about class and crime, and this is going to be for our photo analysis presentation and discussion. Basically, for this discussion, I wanted to explore the relationship between class and crime, but more specifically, what factors lead to increased crime rates in impoverished areas. So basically, lower class is what I'll be focusing on and how it relates to crime and kind of different subcategories. So this picture I took, it was some training we did as police officers in the military, basically just learning how to be a cop, I guess, in the military. But anyways, the first picture here is a picture of me at work. The reason I chose this picture is because one factor that leads to increased crime is employment. So, when a person can't gain employment, they can't meet their basic needs. And this leaves two options. One, you can either struggle and be broke and not have money and not have a decent job to be able to pay bills or feed your family or feed yourself. Or the other option is crime. And by crime for employment, I mean if they need food desperately enough, or they need money desperately enough, or they need gas for their truck, they go and they rob a store at gunpoint. I mean, whatever it may be, because they're so desperate to gain money. And sometimes to people, the only option is crime. So next is housing. This picture is of my little housing area that I live in, little cul-de-sac. So, I mean, basically housing is expensive, and could you survive on the street? And if you had another option, would you choose that other option? Basically, without employment, housing can be a major stress because you can't afford housing. In many areas, housing itself exceeds the limit of what people make, especially if you have children, of course, because they're so expensive, or daycare is expensive to pay for while you're at work. So the cost of housing, in general is just expensive, and that's a stressor. Basically, if it weren't for me and my husband, that would both having employment, that would be very difficult. It just makes me wonder, could you survive on the street? And if you had to survive on the street, what would you do? And sometimes I think crime may be the only option. And for some people, crime is the only option. They steal from stores to get clothes or to get food, and they steal from people. They break into cars and they steal cars. And I think it could just like force their hand into committing more crimes because they just don't have the expense to be paying for housing, basically. Next, here's a picture of a meal I made. It's basically for people, including myself. Food is it's a luxury that we enjoy, but it's also a necessity. It's something we need to fuel our bodies. And that comes to the question, like, what would you do to feed your family? Some of us are very blessed to be able to have a meal every day and have 3 meals every day at that. And we don't know what it's like to go hungry. We don't know what it's like to see your kid go hungry. So maybe for some, crime is the only option. If you can't afford food and there's no one there to help you, or you don't know where to reach out or where to get help, crime may be the only option. So, you can see like a common theme here, that money is a fundamental issue for people who live in poverty, and similar to housing or employment, food is not something that you can go without. So take a single mother, for example, right? She could either allow her kid to starve because she can't afford a meal, or she could commit a crime, like, let's say, prostitution, to make sure she gets money for her child or gets food for her child. Or perhaps she goes and steals from the local convenience store to get a gallon of milk for her child, committing a crime. It makes you wonder, what would you choose? Would you let your kid go starving, or would you go and commit a crime, to make sure your kid is fed, to make sure you are fed? Some people don't hesitate on this, especially in poverty areas, because sometimes that's the only route that they see helping. Next, we have transportation. One last luxury that many people take for granted is transportation. Far too often we hop into a car and we drive place to place, and we go get things we need, and we run our errands, and we go get gas, and maybe we complain a little bit about the gas price, but it's still something we got to do, and we do it. Having the privilege to drive is something that people in poverty might not know what it's like. If they drive, maybe they can't afford the insurance, so they're always in limbo with the law. Cars cost thousands of dollars to buy and hundreds of dollars for gas, insurance, and maintenance. And I mean, if you don't have a proper employment or proper income to be able to pay for something like this, then how can you afford to get transportation? If you don't have transportation, how can you get to work? And if you can't get to work, then how can you make money? Again, this leads to crime, where people steal cars or they do things criminal because they don't see another path. Next, we have behind bars. So people in poverty are more likely to go to jail. And with that being said, they're unable to make bail and unable to afford an attorney. Therefore, they do receive more jail time. Being behind bars more means less time to make money, seek employment. If you have a criminal record, employment isn't going to happen because people don't want to hire you. Basically, this is just another getaway to crime. Once you get jail time, it's just an ending recycle. It goes over and over and over again. And it's just easier to get yourself behind bars. If you don't have the means or the energy to make ends meet in legal ways, being behind bars is sometimes how that ends up. Next, we have education. We're all here today trying to get an education. Either we've been very blessed with grants, money from our parents, or loans. Basically, we took legal routes to get an education for ourselves, and something that leads to crime in poverty areas is lack of education. Poor education limits career opportunities, and without knowledge or skills to climb the economic ladder, I mean, how can anyone get out of poverty? People get stuck in the cycle of poverty and are often left with no choice but to commit crimes, and often taken for granted by people. Education is power. Knowledge is power. With knowledge comes power to get out of poverty, yet people in impoverished areas receive less education than efficient areas. So basically, if you're in poverty, you don't even graduate high school because they don't see an end. If you don't graduate high school, you can't get into college. If you don't get into college, having a higher income is almost impossible. Again, this is where lack of education leads to criminal offenses. Next we have household. So this is my family, very blessed to have my family. Family is something that can keep people from living in poverty. Studies actually show that one parent household, specifically women, single moms, for example, are more likely to live in poverty. My husband and I both work as a team in aspects of bills, chores, and parenting duties, and for that we're very blessed. But honestly, without each other, we would struggle. It would be very hard to maintain the life that we're living now. In areas of poverty, that rate of single motherhood is actually higher than in areas of affluent families. So that is why it is so important for families to stay together. However, with poverty problems comes, a lot of problems with couples and households. And if you're stressed because of low income, it's just can cause a lot of issues. So single family homes overall do commit higher crimes, and the reason is clear: less resources and less stability, I guess, as a whole. So, and next, protection of crime. So, or protection or crime. So basically, this gun represents a lot of things for people. It can resemble gun violence in areas of poverty. It can resemble a safety measure. It can resemble a cool little gadget that people like to fly around. It can resemble a tool for hunting. I mean, it really depends. Those in low poverty may lead a life of crime, and gun crime in areas of poverty are actually higher than affluent areas. So basically, yeah, I mean, that's it. So that is one reason why gun crime is so much higher in these areas is, they use guns to commit crimes or to protect themselves when they aren't supposed to be carrying guns because they're carrying them illegally. And that gets people in jail in poverty areas. And then here's my resources. I used 3 different sources for all the information that I got for my slideshow today. So thank you for bearing with me, and yeah, have a good night.